Hello and welcome back to Ready, Set, Pivot. Let's imagine for a moment that you've arrived in your training classroom early. You have done all of the tech setup, people's name cards are set out, and you even brought snacks. Awesome, go you. And then it happens. You ask your very first question to the group, the question that you've spent some time really thinking about and designing for this moment. You ask the question to the group and nothing happens. It is quiet. Nobody responds. Crickets. Has this ever happened to you before? I'm guessing it has. It's happened to me so many times. The first thing that I want to point out is that anytime we ask a question, we need to give our participants time to think and actually process that question. I simply call it think time, and I use that language all of the time. When I ask a group a question, the language that I say is, okay, I'm gonna give you 60 seconds to think about the question that I just asked you. You might wanna jot down some notes or ideas, but what I want you to do is think about or process the information that I just shared with you. Then I actually use a timer so that people know that when I mean 60 seconds, that's actually what I mean. What does this do for our learners? When you give people think time, it disarms the group from thinking they need to come up with an answer right away. Not everybody thinks that quickly. Some people need time. And actually, if you want people to process and think deeper, giving them that time allows them to go more into that critical level of their brain processing. Let's also think about the learners, maybe for whom their primary language is not the language of the course. Okay, when we have people translating inside of their head, we need to give those folks extra time. When you give your participants think time, it tells your learners that yes, I care about your answers, and I want you to think about what we are talking about, what we're having a conversation about, what we're about to share out loud, meaning this information is important. Okay, so again, the first strategy for you ask a question and nobody responds is to start using the language of think time. Secondly, I like to use a common strategy that you've maybe seen in other places called a think, pair, share. This strategy is exactly what it sounds like. It first allows people time to think, just like our last strategy. And then the next step would be, okay, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to think about your answers, and now I actually want you to pair up with the person next to you and talk through your thoughts. And then lastly, the share piece of it is then we're going to come back as a group, and one of the pair, partner A, partner B, you're going to share what either you or your partner talked about when you paired up. Thirdly, you can use the art of the rephrase. Okay, so if you ask a question and nobody responds, what I want you to do is think about some different ways you can ask that same question. Sometimes people need to hear a question said differently 3 or 4 times so that they're kind of understanding the question from a variety of angles before that light bulb moment happens. Rephrasing is a skill that can be developed through practice. If you're a person who has your training questions prepared ahead of time, which I highly recommend you do, go ahead and then brainstorm some different ways to rephrase one of your key questions. Another tip for rephrasing is to add context around your question to further demonstrate what you're really trying to get across. So let's take a moment and practice here. Time for a little engagement activity. So what I'd like you to do right now is stop and think about a training you have coming up and thinking about one of the questions you want to ask your group. From there, go ahead and write down different questions that you can ask to get at the same point in that initial question. Okay, welcome back. The fourth strategy to use when you ask a question and nobody responds is a very simple one. You can move on. Maybe the question wasn't a good one or relevant in the moment, and that's okay. Sometimes I ask questions in trainings and I think to myself, you know what? It's not really time for that question. We need to do some other work. So I'm just going to move on. And I say that to the group. I might say, hey, okay, well, we're going to come back to this question later. I kind of want it there in the back of your brains, but for the time being, let's move forward. And people do respond well to that. Okay, so we're going to take a quick review here. There are 4 strategies I offered up for you to consider when you ask a question and nobody responds. Number 1, provide think time for your learners so that they can actually process and respond. Number 2, use the think, pair, share strategy, where you have your participants think, use a timer, pair up with someone next to them to talk about their ideas, and then share out as a group. The 3rd strategy is the art of rephrasing a question so that your learners are able to hear the question that you want them to consider from a variety of perspectives or contexts. And lastly, when you ask a question and nobody responds, it is okay just to move on. Fear not, friends, when you ask a question next time in your training and you don't have a response, now you have some different strategies that you can use to pivot in the moment and better meet the learning needs of your learners. We'll see you in the next video.